There is a long tradition of artists using casting as a way to convert softer media, such as clay or wax, to more permanent materials like bronze, iron, or concrete. Because casting generally involves the substitution of one material for another, it is referred to as a substitution process. The process of casting is a sequence of several steps. First, a two-part mold is taken from the original source object. The source object is covered in a mold-making substance that is poured in a liquid state and then hardens into a solid. When the mold-making material hardens, the two-part mold is opened and the source object is removed. The inside of the mold will look something like an inside-out version of the source object itself. Next, a hole is drilled from the outside of the mold to the inside, and the mold is pressed back together. A casting liquid is then poured into the drilled hole to the center of the mold. The casting liquid then needs a chance to harden. Depending on the type of casting liquid, this can take a matter of minutes or even days. Once the casting liquid has hardened, the mold is removed to reveal the finished cast. Some modern casting processes use flexible materials like rubber to allow many casts to be made from one mold. Cake pans use casting to give cupcakes their signature shape. Because casting can be a very complex process, artists will often entrust their mold making and casting to the hands of foundry professionals. Bronze casting is one of the most traditional forms of casting in the Western fine arts. Bronze is a very durable metal that is well suited for outdoor use. This bronze version of Rodin's Thinker would have been made from a mold based on his carved plaster original. There are about 20 different casts of this iconic piece that are scattered throughout 5 continents. Kiki Smith is a contemporary American artist who has made much work that continues the tradition of bronze casting. Smith's cast work is often rooted in fantasy and the subject of children's stories. She often mixes a sense of humor or whimsy with a tinge of darkness or, in some cases, horror. This piece, entitled Rapture, is evocative of the story Little Red Riding Hood. In this version, Smith seems to empower the figure of the grandmother to free herself from the stomach of the wolf, rather than having to wait for the saving prince. While Kiki Smith makes molds of figures from sculpted originals, artists can also create molds from living human figures. To make this self-portrait bust, the contemporary American artist Janine Antony would have sat still while, in this case, a liquid rubber was poured on her face and allowed to dry. To breathe while the mold hardened, she would have had straws stuck in her nostrils or mouth. The resulting piece from this mold was entitled Lick and Lather. Antony made 2 separate casts from the mold, one in chocolate and the other in soap. She then spent a number of sessions with each object, licking the surface of the chocolate and washing the surface of the soap. In the end, the features of each began to disintegrate, breaking down the likeness of the artist. Like Janine Antony, the American artist Dwayne Hansen makes molds from real human figures. In Hansen's case, he takes molds from the entire body of his figures. This entails molding one body part at a time and then assembling the molds before casting. For his casting liquid, Hansen uses contemporary materials such as fiberglass or rubber. He then paints the surface of the cast to resemble human skin and adorns the figures with real human hair and clothes. Like Dwayne Hansen, the contemporary Australian artist Ron Muick makes cast, hyper-realistic human figures out of fiberglass. Unlike Hansen's figures, Muick's figures are never cast at actual human scale. Because of this size difference, Muick uses a slow-drying silicon-based clay to model the originals for his molds. Like the paintings of Chuck Close, the scale of these impressive figures allows us to see more detail than is possible with the naked eye. Not surprisingly, Ron Muick began his career as a special effects designer in the movie business. Now for some more unique takes on the casting process. This is a self-portrait life casting by the contemporary British artist Mark Quinn. Can you guess what the casting substance is? It is nothing less than the artist's own extracted blood. Talk about putting yourself in your work. Because blood remains a liquid unless frozen, this piece needs to remain hermetically sealed in a plexiglass box with a freezer unit attached. The contemporary American artist Tim Hawkinson has made his own take on the casting self-portrait. This piece is a latex cast taken from a mold of the artist's body. The latex is slip cast, which means that instead of creating a solid cast, the latex was only allowed to coat the inner surface of the mold. The latex skin of the artist was then attached to an air pump and inflated like a balloon. Rachel Whiteread is another contemporary British artist who pushes the conventional limits of casting. Instead of creating molds, her casts are taken from already existing things. For this piece, entitled Stairs, she uses concrete to cast the underside of a stairwell. For this piece, displayed on the rooftop of the Museum of Modern Art, she cast the inside of an existing water tower with an acrylic resin. The clear resin seems to reference the removed form of the water itself. For this piece, entitled House, there was a home that was going to be demolished, and Whiteread was given permission to make a public sculpture in its place. She used concrete to cast the entire interior space of the house, and when the original mold of the house was destroyed, the concrete facsimile remained in its place.